Pierce Brosnan always looked like the man who could escape any danger. Whether he was stepping out of an Aston Martin or facing impossible odds as James Bond, he carried the calm confidence of someone nothing could shake. On screen, he represented strength, elegance, and control. But away from the cameras, life revealed a different story. Behind the famous smile was a man who had faced heartbreak that no action hero could overcome. Long before Hollywood recognized his name, Pierce had already experienced loneliness. His father disappeared from his life when he was still an infant, and his mother had to leave Ireland to find work in England. As a young boy, he spent years moving between relatives and family friends, never knowing what it felt like to grow up in one permanent home. Those early experiences quietly shaped the person he would become. Success eventually arrived beyond anything he could have imagined. Millions knew him as James Bond, one of the most iconic characters in film history. Fame brought worldwide admiration, financial security, and the career he had worked toward since his teenage years. Yet, none of those achievements could protect the people he loved most. His first wife, Cassandra Harris, became the center of his world. Together they built a family filled with laughter, children, and dreams for the future. But ovarian cancer slowly stole the life they had planned together. More than 20 years later, the same disease would return to claim the life of his daughter Charlotte, forcing Pierce to endure a heartbreak that no parent ever expects to face twice. Even now, as he continues acting and painting well into his 70s, those losses remain part of him. Time has allowed him to smile again, but it has never erased the memories. The man audiences admire today is not simply an actor who played James Bond. He is someone who learned how to keep living after unimaginable grief. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe and leave a like. Today's story is about more than a movie star. It is about resilience, family, and the quiet strength that exists far beyond the spotlight. Pierce Brendan Brosnan was born on May 16, 1953, in Drogheda, Ireland, and spent much of his childhood in nearby Navan. His earliest memories were marked not by stability, but by separation. His father, Thomas Brosnan, left the family when Pierce was still a baby, leaving his mother, May, to raise him alone during difficult times, determined to build a better future. May traveled to London to train as a nurse when Pierce was only 4 years old. The decision gave her opportunities, but it also meant leaving her young son behind in Ireland. Visits became rare because of work, and sometimes many months passed before mother and son saw each other again. During those years, Pierce was cared for by his maternal grandparents. They became the closest thing he had to everyday parents, offering him comfort during a childhood filled with uncertainty. When they passed away, his life changed once again. He moved from one relative to another before eventually living with a woman named Eileen Riley, whose home became an important part of his early memories. Although his surroundings were modest, Pierce later remembered those years with surprising warmth. His room was small, with a simple iron bed positioned beside a window covered by a green curtain. Newspapers were sometimes placed over the glass to block out the light, creating a tiny world that belonged only to him. It was far from luxurious, but it was filled with kindness and care. Eileen's family welcomed him as one of their own. He found friends in the neighborhood, spent long afternoons exploring the streets, and gradually discovered that happiness did not always depend on wealth or comfort. Looking back decades later, he often described those memories not with sadness, but with gratitude. One of his favorite childhood possessions came from his mother. During one visit from London, she brought home a small slide projector that displayed colorful images of Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck across the bedroom ceiling. For a little boy who loved stories and imagination, those evenings felt magical. The ordinary room transformed into a private movie theater where dreams seemed possible. Not every holiday was joyful. One Christmas, His mother was unable to return because work kept her in England. Instead of seeing her in person, a package arrived containing a pair of worn boxing gloves. Pierce treasured them for many years. To anyone else they may have looked ordinary, but to him they represented something far greater. They reminded him that even across the distance, his mother had not forgotten him. Everything changed again in 1964 when 11-year-old Pierce finally moved to England to live with his mother and her new husband, William Carmichael. After years of temporary homes, he was beginning another chapter in an unfamiliar country. Soon after arriving, the family went to watch the James Bond film Goldfinger. Sean Connery's performance left a powerful impression on the young boy sitting in the audience. He admired Bond's confidence, style, and calm presence, never imagining that one day the same character would define his own career. Life outside the movie theater proved far more difficult. At school, Pierce struggled to fit in. His Irish accent made him an easy target for teasing, and he often felt like an outsider among his classmates. Rather than letting those experiences defeat him, he slowly developed the quiet determination that would later become one of his greatest strengths. By the age of 16, he decided traditional education was no longer the path he wanted. Carrying little more than a portfolio filled with drawings, he left school to pursue commercial illustration. Art fascinated him, and painting became his first creative passion. A chance encounter with an experimental theater workshop changed everything. What began as simple curiosity soon introduced him to acting, movement, dance, and mime. For the first time, he discovered a place where confidence mattered more than background, and imagination mattered more than social status. Realizing he had found something special, Pierce enrolled at the Drama Centre London, where he spent 3 demanding years studying acting. The training was intense, teaching discipline, focus, and emotional control. Those lessons would later become the foundation of every performance he delivered throughout his career. He would eventually say that acting gave him something he had been searching for since childhood. After years of feeling invisible, it allowed him to stand before an audience and truly be seen. But graduation did not bring immediate success. The road ahead was filled with auditions, disappointments, and small roles that barely paid the bills. Like countless young actors, Pierce had to prove himself one opportunity at a time, never knowing which performance might finally change his life. After completing his training in 1975, Pierce Brosnan stepped into professional acting with little more than determination and hope. His first major opportunity came at the Theatre Royal in York, where he performed in stage productions that demanded consistency and discipline. There were no red carpets or celebrity interviews waiting outside the theater. Success depended on earning the audience's attention night after night. The stage quickly became his classroom. Every performance strengthened his confidence, sharpened his instincts, and taught him how to hold an audience without relying on elaborate effects or expensive productions. It was challenging work, but it gave him something priceless: experience. His talent soon attracted the attention of respected playwright Tennessee Williams. After watching Brosnan perform, Williams chose him for a British production of The Red Devil Battery's Sign. For a young actor still trying to establish himself, the opportunity was extraordinary. Even more memorable was what followed. Williams reportedly sent Pierce a brief message expressing his admiration for the performance. It was only a few words, but coming from one of the world's most celebrated playwrights, the encouragement meant everything. It reminded Brosnan that respected voices believed in his ability, even if widespread fame still seemed far away. Theater opened new doors, but film remained difficult to enter. Casting opportunities were limited, and competition was fierce. Like many actors, Pierce accepted smaller parts simply to keep working and continue building his resume. One of his earliest film appearances came in 1980 with The Mirror Cracked, where he shared the screen with established stars including Elizabeth Taylor and Angela Lansbury. Although his role was brief, being part of such a major production introduced him to larger film sets and experienced performers. That same year, he also appeared in the acclaimed British crime drama The Long Good Friday, acting alongside Bob Hoskins and Helen Mirren. Again, the part was relatively small, but each project expanded his experience and helped casting directors recognize his growing potential. Television soon provided more meaningful opportunities. Pierce appeared in several productions that allowed audiences to see more of his range as an actor. His performances began attracting attention not only in Britain, but also in the United States. One of those projects earned him his first Golden Globe nomination, a significant milestone for someone who had spent years struggling through auditions and modest roles. It was becoming clear that his persistence was beginning to pay off. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. In 1982, NBC introduced a detective series called Remington Steele. At its center was a clever concept. A private investigator solved crimes using the name of a fictional detective who did not actually exist. When Pierce Brosnan's charming con artist stepped into the role of Remington Steele, the imaginary detective suddenly had a face. Opposite actress Stephanie Zimbalist, Brosnan brought humor, sophistication, mystery, and effortless charisma to the series. His chemistry with the cast became one of the show's greatest strengths, and viewers quickly embraced him. For 5 successful seasons, Remington Steele transformed Pierce from a struggling actor into an international television star. Millions of viewers admired his polished appearance, confident manner, and natural elegance. Those same qualities also created an unexpected problem. As audiences watched Brosnan in tailored suits delivering witty dialogue with effortless charm, many began saying the same thing. He would make the perfect James Bond. The comparison followed him everywhere. Entertainment magazines, television critics, and movie fans all imagined him wearing the famous tuxedo. Long before he officially became 007, much of the public already saw him as Bond. In 1986, that possibility almost became reality. The producers of the Bond franchise selected Pierce as Roger Moore's successor. For the actor, it was the opportunity he had dreamed about since watching Goldfinger as a young boy. Everything appeared to be falling into place. Then, just as contracts were nearly complete, unexpected complications changed everything. Although Remington Steele had been canceled, NBC still held contractual rights to revive the show if it chose to do so. Brosnan believed the situation would be resolved quickly, and that filming the next Bond adventure would begin without problems. One afternoon, while preparing to celebrate with his wife Cassandra, the telephone rang. His agent delivered devastating news. NBC had decided to bring Remington Steele back for additional episodes. Because of those contractual obligations, Bond producer Albert R. Broccoli refused to proceed with the casting. The producers wanted a James Bond fully committed to the film series, not someone still tied to a television contract. In a matter of minutes, the role Pierce believed was finally his disappeared. Timothy Dalton would become the next James Bond instead. Years later, Brosnan rarely spoke about that disappointment with bitterness. Instead, he simply admitted that losing the role had hurt deeply. It was a painful reminder that careers can change because of circumstances completely beyond an actor's control. Rather than giving up, he focused on the work still available. The years that followed proved how versatile he truly was. In The Fourth Protocol, he stepped away from the charming television image audiences knew so well, portraying a colder and more dangerous character. It demonstrated that he could play far more than smooth gentleman in expensive suits. A few years later came one of his most memorable supporting roles in Mrs. Doubtfire, sharing the screen with Robin Williams and Sally Field. Brosnan played Stuart Dunmire, whose polished appearance hid a surprisingly warm personality. The film became a worldwide success and introduced him to an even larger audience. More importantly, it showed that he could move comfortably between comedy, romance, drama, and suspense. Although James Bond remained just out of reach, Pierce Brosnan's career continued to grow. By the early 1990s, nearly 8 years had passed since that heartbreaking phone call. During those same years, however, his personal life had experienced challenges far more painful than losing a movie role. Then, fate offered him another chance. When Timothy Dalton left the Bond franchise, the producers returned to the actor they had wanted years earlier. This time, nothing stood in the way. In June 1994, Pierce Brosnan was officially introduced as the 5th James Bond. Ironically, the announcement reached people around the world before he had filmed a single scene. While working on location in Papua New Guinea, local children recognized him from international news reports and excitedly called out, "James Bond!" The moment made him smile. After years of waiting, countless auditions, and one unforgettable disappointment, the role that had once slipped away had finally returned. And this time, it was his to keep. GoldenEye finally arrived in 1995 after a 6-year break for the Bond franchise. Many wondered if James Bond still had a place in a changing world, but Pierce Brosnan quickly proved he was the right man for the role. His mix of confidence, charm, and determination won over audiences everywhere, helping the film become a worldwide success and earning hundreds of millions at the box office. After years of setbacks and waiting, the opportunity that had once slipped through his fingers had finally become reality, making him one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. Long before the tuxedo and international fame, Pierce had already found the person who meant the most to him. He married actress Cassandra Harris in 1980 and embraced her 2 children, Charlotte and Christopher, as his own before welcoming their son, Sean. Their family life was filled with love and hope until 1987, when Cassandra was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Pierce stayed beside her through every surgery, treatment, and hospital visit, refusing to leave her side even as the disease slowly took its toll. On December 28, 1991, just one day after their wedding anniversary, Cassandra passed away at only 43 years old, leaving Pierce to comfort 3 grieving children while dealing with the greatest loss of his own life. More than 20 years later, history repeated itself in the most heartbreaking way. Pierce's adopted daughter Charlotte was diagnosed with the same illness that had taken her mother. She fought the disease for several years while raising her own family and married her longtime partner only weeks before her death. In June 2013, Charlotte passed away at the age of 41, forcing Pierce to endure the unimaginable pain of losing both his wife and daughter to the same cancer. Rather than allowing grief to silence him, he began using his public platform to support cancer, research, and encourage greater awareness of the disease. Life slowly brought new beginnings when Pierce found love, again with journalist Keely Shea Smith. Together, they built a stable family, raised 2 sons, Dylan and Paris, and supported environmental and humanitarian causes around the world. Although he eventually stepped away from the James Bond role, he continued acting, producing films, and returning to his lifelong passion for painting. Today, Pierce Brosnan's story is remembered not only because he played one of cinema's greatest heroes, but because he faced real-life heartbreak with quiet strength, never allowing loss to define the man he chose to become.